aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next is questions, concerns on that? Not, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Moved in second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next, public comments. Is there anybody here who'd like to speak to something that's not on the agenda? Old business substation update. Glenn, do you got any?
Really no more new information on
Julie, you got anything on that?
Yeah, I got a note from Jeff. See if I can bring it up here. He said that he doesn't really have much news, but the KMEA Mid-States Group got the master service agreement, and I guess you signed it, and so that it went back to them at the end of last week. And he said hopefully they'll have some budgetary numbers to compare with Luke's daily and rain estimates soon. Pat is also working on a plan for the routes of the secondary lines so that we can get an estimate on the complete project. Said the costs do change slightly for the different locations proposed. That's all I know.
Anybody from the public like to speak to this agenda item? Council discussion? Only thing I'll add is one of the properties we talked about did go on the market. Where the mobile homes
I saw
With it.
that Stephen signed today.
Yeah, so I
Which
think
one?
where's the mobile home where behind Cody Anna's building?
Oh, okay.
So just, I guess FYI, I think they're asking. $130,000.
So all on Baker Street?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't.
Was $4 million what was originally mentioned for that substation?
We've been everywhere.
Is that where it's at now, it's $4 million?
4.5 was the last.
Rough estimate.
So
I think
100
the original engineer's estimate was around 3.5 to 4, wasn't it?
So they want 130 for that property.
Might just, as you guys talked about in committee.
Well, we haven't met since our last meeting, so we'll talk about it this coming, not this Thursday, next Thursday.
Next Thursday at 9 o'clock, right?
Any other comments on this agenda item?
What's the size of that property?
It's basically a full block. I mean, it's pretty decent size property. I think, I've heard Rob mention that the utilities under there are all kind of wonky. So,
What kind of what?
wonky, messed up.
Yeah,
I've never seen the utility aerials of it to see where they actually run on there, but I've heard they're kind of messed up. And it is, I believe, zoned residential, so. There's that, anybody that buys it, it's not intended to use it for residential or have to get it rezoned. Any other discussion on that or two item? Next, building lease for 726 High Street. There's a copy of the lease in your packet. You guys had a chance to review it. I did review it. I asked Glenn just a couple questions just for clarity because I had a council member ask me. So, that lease does read that the council would pay property taxes. On our other buildings that we've leased out, we haven't been charged property tax yet. But typically, once the use changes, you get charged property tax. I did the quick assess valuation calculation, and it was fast, so I won't hold me to this number, but based on that, on their assessed valuation, came out to about $400 per year. Is property tax costs. So just what I counsel on how this is.
So any other leases were written, did not include that?
I'm not sure. I have to defer to Glenn.
No, it doesn't. Right now, we aren't paying, it's really up to each county assessor. They assess property every year. So when they assess and reassess, most of the time when you are using property for commercial use, they will have some kind of property tax, but they aren't right now. We're leasing 2 buildings right now, and they're not charging us property tax. Most of generally our property is tax exempt, but there are changes. But each county, every county has been a little different on this. So it depends on who's assessing it and kind of what theory they use as far as what's taxable and what isn't. So
But I think our other leases too, you were asking if our other leases written in the property tax, if we pay it or they do. I don't know that.
no, they're not.
This is the first lease we came up with the ordinance, so.
So how's it handled if it comes back and the county says, okay, you gotta pay property tax?
We'd be, based on the lease, we'd be paying it.
Because it's not, we didn't have that listed in our contract at all.
No, it states in there that the city pays for
Yeah,
it. So the city would be paying.
I understand, I got it, I read it.
Property tax and the insurance, I believe, on the exterior building. Not the condo.
Yeah, as we do right
That's
now.
what it's charging.
That would make it consistent with the practice of the other 2 buildings. So
It would, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, we still maintain ownership and as far as insurance goes, that's part of our overall coverage that we have every year.
Anybody from the public like to speak to this agenda item? Step on up. Just gotta state your name and your address for us.
My name is Lori Trojan. My address is 649 East 1450 Road, Lawrence, Kansas, which is actually between Baldwin and Lawrence in the county. I also read the lease. The lease looks great. I just have a few items that we discussed at the last council meeting that are not in the lease. And so I would just like to ask that those items that we already discussed be included. One of which is the mold mitigation, which we talked about, that the city has agreed to take care of. It's just not mentioned in the lease. And may I just say that if I mention something and you have seen it in the lease, please bring that to my attention. I may have missed something, but I did not see that.
There's a higher likelihood we missed something.
I'm sorry?
There's a higher likelihood we missed something.
Well, the mold mitigation is a big one. I have already had the health department come in and take a look at the building, just so that I could make sure that everything that is done in the building is up to standard for the health department. I think that's very important. So I thought it would be proactive to get them out early with a list of things that must be done so we could follow that. And it is clear, perhaps I should restate that. It is assumed that there is mold in the building by the health department. There are visible signs of it, and there is a smell, which suggests that there is mold. The city agreed to mitigate the mold, and so I would like for that to be included in the lease, if you would, just that the city would pick up the expense of that. Something else we talked about in our last council meeting, and that was something that the council suggested that I had not, which I was grateful for, and that would be that there would be no raise in rent over the full 5-year contract period, the full 5-year lease period. I did not see that in the lease. You may have. I did not see that.
I just listed a flat 200 a month for 5 years.
Correct.
Right.
So that would,
Yeah, that pretty
It
much.
would-
And that,
If
does
it
that,
doesn't mention it.
if it doesn't mention it, then you don't.
can't go
then we
back.
can assume,
Yeah, our other leases do have a.
that certainly works for me. Thank you.
I read that and I thought the 5% wasn't there, and I thought, well, I kind of rejected that.
And, sorry.
That's quite all right. Did
Well, I was
you?
just gonna say, just for clarity purposes, the train depot just accidentally flipped that one over instead of this one when I was reviewing it.
I'm sorry, I
Does
couldn't hear
require-
you. The train depot, sorry.
The train depot lease does require the tenant to pay for the property tax on that. of our leases are kind of all over. But this is at least from Santa Fe. That'll be the next.
Also, I had requested the first 6 months of occupancy at a courtesy of no rent. That was my suggestion because there is so much work to be done on the small building. It needs full plumbing. It needs full electric. There's electric there already. I do not want to mislead you. There is electric installed already. It needs to be upgraded from 110 to 220. I've already gotten an estimate on that, but nevertheless, it does need to be done. And also HVAC. So we need a tankless water heater. We need, many things done in that building. It is simply an empty box in order to bring it to a usable state. This may take some time, and so I had asked for a little bit of a break in the rent for the first few months of being in there, and I thought that was agreed upon last meeting, but I did not see that in the lease, and now I am questioning as to whether we did agree fully to that, but I would like for you to consider that. I know that there's another building that the city owns and is renting currently where a 6-month grace period was given, and I just wondered if perhaps the same grace might be extended to me. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I think if we've done it for somebody, then I don't know why we couldn't do it for you.
Who have we done it for, do you know?
Yeah, but I don't know if that is a pertinent
You don't know
thing
if
to
that's
know.
appropriate or not, but you know that it has been done.
It was the police station.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The what?
it was the police station, yeah.
Yeah, it took a lot longer for them to do
Yeah.
exactly what you're talking,
That's
because
one of the
they got
things.
into that, and it took 6 months to get that to where they needed to open. So, yeah, they didn't pay for the first 6 months on that, as they, they didn't have any revenue, so it was a real challenge to do that. And they ran into a lot more challenges than they thought they would going there. That was not an easy process to convert that building. So, yeah, for the first 6, they didn't really win on that, so.
I think anytime you do any renovation, you're gonna find out, I mean, it's bigger space, of course, but you'll find out there's other things that you didn't know were gonna come up. So,
Always.
Is this, I'm not against I'm not against a request, but I have a question about it. If we allow that and something happens and she doesn't make it work, it doesn't work, does it have to be in the contract that we would not be responsible to reimburse her for the work she may have done or anything like that? Do we need anything like that?
Well, technically, legally, once you fix something to a property by screwing or
So the
something.
light bulb stays, is that what you're saying?
That's
Part of
right.
real property, it is actually theft when you review that.
And that is actually in the lease currently. That,
I'm not trying to make a problem for you.
that's okay, Jerry. I appreciate everything and any discussion that goes on this evening. I think it is all valuable. Everybody must feel comfortable. But it is already in the lease that if I should leave, that anything that is attached will stay. Anything that is not is my option to take or dispose of, but not to leave. So anything that would be done during that period, it does not come with me, it stays with the building, so I believe that what you are talking about is already covered in the lease to the protection of the city.
I agree with you, Julie. I agree.
And then there is just one final item, and that is that it says the lease is for a term of 5 years, beginning on the first day of September, ending on the 31st day of August 2027, which of course covers the full 5 years. I just wondered if we need to have language here that says something like, with an allowance for immediate access to begin the build-out and not to wait until September 1st, since obviously if you are willing to give that grace period anyway with no lease being due, that you would allow me immediate access to begin this process. I'd like to get started as quickly as possible to try hard to get that building done sooner rather than later.
I don't think you're gonna be able to get in there until the mold's remediated anyway, right?
Yeah.
Not doing any substantial work, I don't know.
That's it.
Whatever,
That is,
yeah.
that is
And
a
then-
priority.
So,
Yeah, the plan right now is to have the people who are doing the power building mold remediation, because we know we have plenty of mold in there. They promise to come over and look at it, and they'll either do it for like, if it's on the same mobilization, they may not even charge us for that.
When
I
are they
can't
even
promise
doing
that.
that? I mean, isn't that,
Well, they said they'd come over and look at it.
when would they do their remediation?
I don't have a date yet for them, that's the problem. So, those guys are a little bit booked right now, so it's kind of hard to schedule that. So we'll come up with a backup plan. If we don't hear them in the next couple of weeks, then we'll get somebody else to do it. Because it's a lot of bleach, that's mold remediation. It's a lot of scrubbing, it's a lot of bleach. That's really what it is. So they're not the only ones who do it, so.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the possibility that if the folks who are doing the Bauer building could not get out there in a time-efficient manner, shall I say, I have already done my research in that there is a company in Lawrence that does mold testing to find out what is the level of mold that we are dealing with. Does it exist, or is it just a smell? Does it just require paint and all will be well, or does it require something more? I've been told that a testing first is almost imperative to find out, does the problem even exist? If it does, to what extent? And in doing the testing, this company also then recommends the remediation that is required. And then there is a company in Lawrence called ServPro, who I have already spoken to. That is their main focus, is to remediate mold as recommended by the people who do the testing. So I've already gotten an estimate on the testing itself, though obviously we cannot get an estimate on any remediation, not knowing whether or not that is even required at this point. But I would recommend that a test be a certainty, rather than just having people come in and bleach and paint. We don't know whether bleach and paint will take care of the issue. I am not a mold remediator. I am not really qualified to say whether or not that will take care of it or it will not. I am only suggesting that perhaps a test might be in order. And if so, then that we move on that fairly quickly. That would be my recommendation,
Back
but
to your ask about, is there any liability in letting potential tenant into the building that may have a mold issue?
so may I suggest that that building has already been used for the Master Gardeners and for the Chamber of Commerce in the past.
Liability.
But yes, that is correct. But
I mean,
yes, it is
you may not
currently,
have had it.
as we speak, it is
Right.
being used, right? People are going in and out, spending time in
Great
there
point,
and,
but
yeah,
Answer the question now.
yeah, yeah.
well, I don't know if changing the dates are gonna even be relevant. I'll be surprised if that mold remediation
Well-
and testing get done.
She's asked to go get in there.
Oh, with the mold there.
Well, yeah, before the September date. That was the ask.
There's not much that can be done without that mold remediation done first. I mean, that is the priority. But I think what I'm really suggesting is that if we cannot get that done in a timely manner, that I would like to know if we could, as Glenn suggested, perhaps have a Plan B for that, so that we could move a little bit more quickly on that building. I would suggest, too, that even if remediation does need to be done, it is 160 square feet. It is a very small building. Whatever remediation is required, I would suggest would probably be a minimal cost compared to some. So there is that. But yes, we cannot really move forward until that issue is resolved. Thoughts on that?
Any other questions for Lauren? Any other questions for us?
I don't have any more questions, just really just whether or not those few things. So it's really the mold mitigation being paid for by the city, the 6-month grace period, and the allowance of me to enter the building to start the process, the first of which would be the mold remediation. And if you are comfortable with those things, to include those in the lease.
Anybody like to comment to this agenda item? Okay, council discussion?
I think everything that she's asked for is, seems to be a problem to me.
Yeah, I agree, and mold mitigation needs to be handled anyways, and we've given a 6-month.
Just make sure you go in there as your gardener capacity, not as a future.
He's making this part a public record for a reason. The legality side of it.
Just pick up a shovel.
No perishable items inside that building.
Yes, please.
Actually, I prefer nobody enter that building.
Once it's been taken care of, most taken care of, do we need our city inspector to inspect it before?
They usually do a follow-up test. I believe to test their
Our people or the
company. That's how they do houses anyway. So if they're gonna have them mold mitigated, kind of like radon or anything else, they usually test afterwards what they're done to verify. Things will take care of. Dakota, did you get all those?
I put some of them already into I've got a document up right now. But what I'm looking at is the additional clause for mold remediation, which would be stating that the city will be responsible for remediating any mold located in the 726 High Street building. The only question I'd have for the council would be is, you're talking about a relatively small area. If someone comes out and are we going to be the ones getting the quote and doing it, or are we going to be paying for or remitting payment to Lori, whoever she has come out to do it?
Probably need to pay directly to the company.
And so is there a cap on that the city would want to put in place? And again, we're talking about a few, 150 square feet basically, but if we got a quote that was $17,000, what would you, how would council want to handle that?
I mean, I'd leave that to the discretion of our city administrator.
Yeah, we're going to another company. That's what we do with that one.
So-
It's not.
The only other question I had in here, it was talked about that we want to make sure we preserve the garden areas, which I have no, I have no doubt that that's going to be done. But in this lease that we draw, that is for the building.
So what I've got here, I've also added now that I have Glenn and I talked about it this a few days ago, now I've got the address and I'll put in there a specific exhibit, which would then have outlined the structure located at 726 High Street, outlined so you can see what exactly would be the lease. Because right now, the parcel of 726 High Street includes, I think,
Yeah.
all that we're talking about is solely the structure located on that parcel. So that will be spelled out in section 1, the premises and terms, but it'll also then be attached an exhibit with an aerial view that will then outline just solely the structure in 726 High Street.
I just think for legality reasons and liability reasons, I think both sides would want that. Just if somebody gets hurt gardening or whatever, that Lori's not going to be responsible for that area maintaining.
And I think for insurance purposes, if I was, for both parties, I'd want to know exactly what I'm insuring. Because I think that will decrease potential insurance for the leasing.
You should.
And then the only other question is, I think my understanding is that there's a 6-month grace period for rent. I've already added that into the terms of this contract. I'm not extending the contract. I mean, it's still a 5-year term. The first 6 months of that contract would be, it still not be obligated to make any monthly payments. So it would be 6 months with no payments.
Any further council discussion on this agenda item?
There's one other issue, and I think that would just be, allowing the leasee to have access to the building prior to the September 1st date. I think that, Laura, you brought that up, correct? It doesn't necessarily have to be through contract, but as long as let's discuss and approve here, that's just another thing. I want to make sure that's covered somewhere.
I might just add that here in the lease, the address says 725 High Street, and I am uncertain as to whether that is correct or 726.
I have 726 here, and originally I did not have any address in what I sent.
I didn't even know it had an address.
And what I have now is 726 High Street.
That side of the street's evens, so it would make sense that it's 26 instead of 25's on the south.
So perhaps we could change that on the lease as well. My copy says 725.
I would say that what I drafted up originally had no address in there, it had an XXX. So when I
That's what I thought.
updated it, I put it in 726. So we're on the same page.
Any other council discussion?
So when will the lease be ready then to then?
You could approve it tonight as amended,
Uh,
if you wish to.
And is it correct then that only, that I would put a signature and that Glenn would put a signature, and that is all that's required?
Correct, all council members don't sign, either myself or Glenn do.
I'm sorry, could not hear.
Either myself or Glenn sign, the
Yeah,
lease is,
approved tonight.
is approved by the council, so we have to have their
Very good.
authority to sign.
Well, I move that we agree to the lease for 726 High Street as amended as of tonight.
Second.
Moved and second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. All right, next new business ordinance, water rates, first reading.
All right.
It's on you. It's your committee.
I know.
I'll let you explain
This
this.
is our committee. So, yeah, we'll try to keep this, understand, if you pull up the document, I think it's G.2.B.2022-0503 in your packet.
Dot XX,
Yeah.
dot Y.
So you pull up that spreadsheet, we can talk from that, I think it'll help. And just so what we were looking at in the finance committee was, I think guidance from the council in previous meetings was that, one, we wanted to try to get our reserve balances within policy. Was kind of the end goal of the rate discussion. And so what we took that task in the finance committee, and so the decision comes down to how quickly do you want to get within policy, right? So you can see on rows, if we're talking water rates, on row 29, that's the projected cash reserve on row 29, and the 90-day reserve is right below that. So you can see on column D, row 29 and 30, expected close of this year, we're well short of that policy. Okay.
What is the policy?
Well, right now it's 25% of, or 3 months operating expenditures.
Just explain it so that people are listening.
Yeah, so 3 months is the target reserve. I think we talked about, to help us stay within policy, and it's gonna fluctuate year to year. So I think we talked about sometime at the end of this year, revising our policy to give us a range of 15 to 25%. 2 to 3 months. In that way, as it fluctuates down, we're still within policy, and the goal would be to try to move it back. So you can see in water, substantial cash reserve issue we've had. You've all known that since you joined the council. So so we decided, so you can do that a couple of ways. You can get it healthy in 1 year by raising the rates high enough that you get enough cash reserves in 1 year to do it. It would be substantial rate increase. So what we decided to look at here is what we see is getting within that current policy within the next 5 years or 4 years after this year, so next 4.5 years. So with the proposed rate change of 5%, you can see that on row 28. So we're proposing a 5% increase to $13.72 per 1,000 gallons. So that would happen second reading, so probably September. So if you look at that 5% increase, and then the proposed increase starting in January 2023 would just be more of a cost of goods or just an inflationary increase of 2.52% every year. So what that would do, now when you look at the two gray rows below that, the row 29 and row 30 is, now you can see how our cash reserve at the end of each year starts to approach, the actual target, and we get there in 2026. Now, there's assumptions that have to be made around, costs, inflation, all those things. So based on everything that Ben could bring forward with, what's the conventional wisdom, and those assumptions, we would get this back to, 25% of expenditures in 2026, potentially into the 15% range in 2025. So really the question for the council is, you're going to have to raise rates to get there. How quickly do you want to do it? So the other part of this discussion is, well, they're there for a reason, right? So they're there for emergencies. What do you do if you have a big expense that you didn't plan for? That's why you have those reserves. So if you recall, in previous budget discussions, we talked about the ARPA funds that came in, the two tranches, $360K 2 times. And what we're planning to do in the budget, as you saw from the work session, is take one of those 360K tranches and put it right into the general fund, which goes right to the reserve. So if you remember, there was a general fund reserve that had issues as well. So all of our reserves had issues. What that would do is really make that general reserve fund healthy starting like this year. So we go from problem to healthy because of those ARPA funds. Well, what that does for these other reserve funds is, in case of an emergency, and what we've looked in the assumptions is, we've made the assumption that the water utility or reserve could borrow up to $300,000 over a 3-year period from the reserve fund if need, or from the general reserve fund or general fund if needed. So as an insurance policy, that's where that would come from. Then it would be paid back out of the water reserve in the following 3 years. So it's a loan, but you got to pay it back. So really, what the finance committee really thinks is it's the least impact for the citizens over a longer period of time. Plus, we have the insurance policy of having funds in the general fund in case of emergency that we could use in the water fund. So that was the thinking of going for 4 or 5 year get well plan. Same issue on the sewer rates, not quite as bad. You can see, again in column D, row 34 and 35, or excuse me, 37, 38. You see at the end of this year, we'll be at, well under our target. But with a $1.50 increase in September 1 of this year, and another $1.50 increase per 1,000 gallons, and then no increase after that, you can see that we get to target reserve, in 2024, basically 2 years. And we'd have the same ability, to use the general fund if needed to support any kind of catastrophic expenditure we might have. Unless you have anything to add. I was going to see, Corey, anything you want to add?
No, you hit on all of it.
Okay.
Anybody from the public like to speak to this agenda item? Seeing none, council discussion. I think it's just to add maybe for clarity or the ordinance calls for the water increase over that period of time, but in a sunset. It doesn't continue forever, Right, so
So
just
it
gets us,
sunsets in 26.
it just gets us back to reserve policy.
When you were figuring this, did you take into consideration of raising the cost of the meter instead of the cost of the water? The meter that you're dealing with there is probably $175 piece of equipment.
So part of what we, I don't know where you're going with it, part of what we were trying to do and we're still trying to do is change the rate structure of how we bill. We're trying to keep that meter fee, really just carries the bond or debt payments in that.
That's what it's supposed to do.
Right, but if we move in like the per gallon rate charges into that, then you started mixing.
Won't you wind up eventually charging more for your water than you are for your meter service?
It's all combined into the analysis of your revenue.
It shouldn't be separated,
Well, the bond
because that's where, the bond.
will be separate, the bond.
Yeah.
The money for the bond, once we get the billing, that's why we upgraded the system. I believe staff's been working with that software company to try to get it.
The bond payment is separate in the budget, right? There's a separate bond line item. How we get to that with, the fees, I think is what we're trying to get clarity on in the bill. Is the meter fee all goes toward payment of the bond. There is no fluctuating rate associated with that, other than if you bond more, you borrow more, that meter fee is gonna go up to cover that new payment stream. And then any other costs like reserve fund, health, goes into the water rate itself.
I'm really only gonna argue about one way or the other, but to me, it seems much simpler and easier, even though you've got this bond rate that you're taking this for, to receive your monies from the meter service, the debt service, as you would call it. And I don't know how much we're paying for water for 1,000 gallons, or 100,000 gallons. How much are we paying for 100,000 gallons of water to fill our tank?
I don't know.
I mean, it'd be for 1,000.
Yeah, just do the number, yeah. So
Anyway, the reason I say that, Scott, is because,
130.
as you know, I spent time with water service. And the debt service was always the thing that came from the cost of the meters. You might be paying $45 a month for the meter, which is right off the top. You got that payment coming, and you're charged X amount of dollars, so much for the use of the water.
Right.
And the water was usually tried to kept lower than what the meter charge was.
So you just articulated what we're doing. That's exactly what we're doing. Is that fee of $12 for the water rate covers our debt payments for that fund.
No,
Or is that-
we went backwards there.
Did we?
Yeah, because the meter itself should be what's taking care of your debt service, not the cost of water.
That's
The
correct.
meter
That's
fee.
correct.
The meter fee.
Or base charge.
There's nothing else in the meter fee other
So
than
this
debt.
is the
Yes.
meter fee.
You got it for $12 and then you got it for 15,
So-
16 from,
So what's confusing here, Jerry, is in that $12 base charge, there's a meter fee and some other fees that we're trying to get pulled out. So you just have a meter fee that does exactly what you're saying. But that's a billing, that's a change in billing. It doesn't change the cost to the citizens at all. It just changes how that bill shows up. And for their, $200 they paid that month or whatever it is, how that's spread out between the meter fee, franchise fee, and the consumption fee. Those are the three fees we talked about in the new structure we're trying to get to. Meter, franchise, and consumption.
but you're never gonna get it any cheaper, and that's what you got here. You're eventually gonna have to go up, but
Right.
this is cheap water. I hope the people understand that this is cheap, because out there in the water districts, they're paying $60, $70 a month.
The meter fee's cheap.
The meter fees are cheap here.
Correct. That's because we haven't taken out the bond payments yet from the actual water rates. That meter fee you're seeing there doesn't cover all our bond.
How are we, so
What meter fee?
we're accumulating money ahead of the game then by our water costs, is that what you're saying?
What's that?
We accumulate money to be ahead of our costs by selling the water, is that the way you're doing
Right now, the city has always just increased the rate. They've never increased the base fee, the meter fee. The water districts call it the meter fee. So whenever they bond, they just increase the rate. We're trying to get it and take out that data and say, okay, this amount is what's needed from every meter to pay for this bond. That has not been done. That has been a goal that once this is done, then we start extrapolating that data from that water fee.
I'm not going with it.
No, I asked questions. I mean, we've been talking about this for
I think we get to where you're talking about though, and we can,
our goals by the end of the year. So,
I think the money should be accumulated from the sale of meters, so the meter is right there.
so what do you think that's, the sale of the meter should cover?
The sale of meters should cover just about, you say you've got a bond, it should cover some of that, and you should have some money left over to put into a fund to carry for future times that we may need it.
you're talking about selling like rural water districts selling a water meter for $8,000, right?
So they do that, I don't know if they do that much or not, but they do it,
Is that what you're talking about?
about 6,000. And then after they sell that water meter for, let's say, 4,000, every month, then there's a fee just to have that water meter on your property, which could be anywhere from $35 to $45.
And
Then they pay so much, 1,000 gallons for the water that they use,
correct.
with nothing. We're not doing that. We're getting our money from the sale of the water. Some of it,
No, we're getting our money from the meter fee
to pay the bond,
to pay the bond.
right.
So that's a wash.
But where are we
And there's a
saving?
franchise fee that gets put back in the general fund. 3%? 3%? Or is it 5%? And then the rest of it is the rate based on what we get charged for the water and our operating costs. We have to get the rate to where it covers that. And that's where the rate comes from. And that, at the end of the year, you should, your expenses should meet your revenue. With enough left over, you have to build it back up to get the reserve fund where it needs to be.
I get what you're saying. Yes, you're right. It's the water usage that is playing catch up. We're playing catch up with the water
That's
usage.
right.
And that's why it sunsets. But to Scott's point, it's your entire operating, which includes your 25% reserve. That's a part of your operating. That's what we're chasing. That's what we're trying to get to. So, but it is the rates that we're using to chase it.
Sorry to interrupt.
No.
Council discussion. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, it's open. It's council discussion. It's council discussion.
If you had the question, I'm sure others had the same thing.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sorry?
if you had that question, I'm sure others had it as well, so ask away. It's never bad to ask a question.
It's just different than, it doesn't make a difference how you kill a bear just so he don't eat you. Or, so it's the same thing.
Right.
Any other council discussion on this agenda item? Alright, we'll move on. Ordinance sewer rates, first reading.
Pretty much covered that. Same discussion. If you look at the second part of that, in rows 37, 38, 37 is the current cash reserve estimated at the end of the year. And then, with $1.50 per 1,000 gallon increase starting in September 1 and $1.50 per 1,000 additional $1.50 starting in January 1st, 2023, and then no more increases in this ordinance. You can see that we get the reserve whole in 2024, at the end of 2024. I really think the discussion with the council is you can support more increases and shorten that time, or less increases and extend that time before we get the reserve. And that to me is the discussion.
Anybody here from the public like to comment to this agenda item? All right, council discussion? Gary, you're itching, you might as well say
I'm
it.
sorry?
You're itching to say it. Say something. So we kind of left this one a little bit open for the council, just to tell us, you know, we know, I mean, over the time, do we want to spread it over 3 times? Do we want to keep it at $1.50, where does the council?
I mean, assuming it's all okay, and I think based on our early clarifications, it is, to use that ARPA money to put in the general fund, and then use that as a insurance against your insurance. I mean, that works.
Yeah.
I like that.
That's what we're doing to prolong.
Right, because you may not need your reserve, but it's there
Right.
kind of if you do.
And if we don't make the loan from the general.
Right.
This doesn't happen.
Right. So that seems pretty good to me.
As written.
Yeah.
Everybody good with that? We move on then. Next one, ordinance STO, first reading. This is an annual thing, as laws change, you guys have 2 books. One's the standard traffic ordinance book for municipalities, and we have to adopt those so our law enforcement can enforce the new laws within that book. So this is an annual, this is the first reading. We can do whatever, I don't know what we change out of it.
Has everyone read it cover to cover?
Is there anybody here from the public that has read this book and like to speak to this?
Pop quiz, Chief's giving a pop quiz.
I haven't seen it. It should be in the very back.
The answers?
You know, they submit what the changes are year to year.
Okay.
It gives you the cheat sheet.
What was it?
In the very back?
I believe it's in the very back, or it comes as a separate document when it
There it
ships. I have not seen these yet, so
There it
I
is.
can't tell.
They're fresh out the press.
There's been a change in funeral processions.
I mean,
No public comment, council discussion?
All we could do is.
what are you gonna do if you disagree?
Well,
You can change your ordinance to
the ordinance can do,
more strict.
more
Home rule,
restrictions,
right.
but you can't do less.
Can't do
You
less.
Make it more,
Right.
that's the question.
I don't think the state went far enough.
That's what you have in front of you.
Sure.
Council discussion? You want to hold this over for a second reading? Council can act.
Yep.
I don't see the point of doing it, but that's mine.
Corey might want to read the book in between the
He
first
seems very
reading.
interested.
I jumped right to the electioneering section, so I'm wondering what the heck that's about.
You got big plans? To do some of that?
Don't know yet. See what the law allows us here.
That's a good thing to know.
I'm okay, moving on the first reading.
Yeah, same.
Is that a motion?
I don't think we need one.
Yeah, you do.
We do?
Yeah.
Okay.
We do.
Move to.
Okay.
I move we approve the 2022 standard traffic ordinances.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Julie?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Corey?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Gary?
Yeah.
Huh? Motion passes 5-0.
Hard time.
Do we need the,
Struggled there.
do we need uniform code?
Well, talk about
Now we are moving on to the
it.
uniform
Those.
I know.
public offense code.
It's
Is
a
there any
shame.
public comment to this agenda item?
Always wondering what you think.
Not, council discussion? Any discussion? Not, I'll entertain a motion.
I I move we approve the Uniform Public Offense Code for 2022.
Second.
Moved and seconded, Julie,
Aye.
Scott,
Aye.
Corey,
Aye.
Susan,
Hi.
Jerry.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
I got that.
Next is the depot lease. I can give a brief, just synopsis of this. So the Santa Fe's here representing, we'll let Roger speak here in a moment. But the city has to approve any lease that the Santa Fe does. So this is the time that we can review and ask questions. So Roger, if you want to step up and just give a brief synopsis, I guess.
Roger Boyd, address 510 3rd Street, Baldwin City.
You didn't have to ask him anymore. He knows.
You know.
President of Santa Fe Trail Historical Society. I don't know what to say. I have had a discussion with Jason Pryor, and I think Dakota has also been involved in this, that we do need to tweak the, let's see, there were 3 things: insurance, the waiver of subrogation, and there was one other thing. But anyway, we needed to include the city in the statement rather than just the landlord.
And I can address those 3 sections if the council wants me to. The 3 sections that we're looking at in this lease, the first would be the paragraph 11, or sorry, paragraph 14, subsection D, which is the waiver of subrogation. That's where it's talking about the landlord and tenant waive all rights against each other. You also include that the landlord and tenant would waive all rights against in this case, the leaseor, which would be the city, so that should there be some fire, other destruction there, we would be held responsible for that underneath the contract, as that there would be the waiver there. The not this lease, but the lease that we have with Santa Fe already contemplates them having insurance for the entire premises of the building for fire, so that should be, that category of insurance should be in place. But this is just an additional protection so that we aren't the only people left holding the bag should, for some reason, that insurance be denied or there be some issue with it. So that's the paragraph 14, subsection D.
On that, Dakota, we shouldn't be listed as a leaseor though, we should be listed just as landowner, correct?
In
Under this, since this is a sublease.
in this section, the way we are being described in this contract is as the lessor. So if you looked at the second
I'm sorry,
paragraph.
yep, I see that.
So I'm just mirroring the language of the contract. The next section you look at would be paragraph 15. That's the hold harmless section, where the tenant hereby covenants and agrees to indemnify, protect and save harmless landlords, officers, all those things. We would also want to be held harmless as the leaseor by the tenant and the landlord. And then, as to, I believe, there's, let me see what the 3rd section was.
Is it 14B and D?
The 14B, the liability insurance. I think so. Like, that's not what Jason and I discussed today.
Oh, okay. My confusion.
And then though, I could be wrong as well about it. I know there's the two issues were the waiver of subrogation and then the hold harmless provisions. I don't know. I think there's also a question about whether or not we were listed in here to incorporate the lease between Santa Fe and the city, but that's the chapter or paragraph 25, the prime lease. So that's where it lists that basically everything that's in that lease is then going to be it becomes an obligation of the landlord in this lease. So the tenant then is agreeing to all the same provisions that we had put together in the prime lease.
Right.
Just pass through the obligations to
Right.
your.
Correct.
Yeah, so I think what I'm here to say is, the old saying is, my people will get with your people and we'll work this all out.
So,
It's not gonna
on
be
this
just-
lease, should there be a signature line for the city to sign then?
No,
No,
Okay, to approve it?
we can approve it here, but we wouldn't be signing off on anything if we're not a party to it. We
right,
just have underneath on the prime lease, there is a, prior written consent needs to be, obtained. I would say this, and, Robert, you can help me out with this. You have you already signed off on this lease with, Midland?
This
Sorry,
one?
Yes.
yes,
So what would probably need to happen, because it's prior written consent, would be signed off on if the city submits their written consent, the parties here probably need to execute a subsequent agreement, so that would be reflected as having occurred after the written consent was given. Otherwise, it's not prior written consent, so I wouldn't want to be caught.
For tonight, the council can approve the written consent for
Correct.
Midland LLC,
Correct.
to lease. Midland,
So you can, the written consent would be for this lease agreement that the city would approve this lease agreement between the two parties, and provide them written consent of the approval.
that makes sense.
Like I said, that what I think that we subject to amendment, the amendments we would make to the, agreement that we've asked the parties to make the agreement to submit back to us for, just to make sure that's in there. When they do a amendment would be for the language regarding, holding the city harmless and, the waiver of subrogation against the city as well, so that the city's not on the hook for anything. The parties have waived against each other as the leaseor, in this agreement. And then that, I think, would also cover our ability to have the prior written consent if you submitted that back to the city with those changes after the written consent was given.
So you need approval tonight for them to enter into a lease that would then be brought back before the council, or once that approval is given, I mean, that's kind of
The approval
legalities.
the approval would be based upon the amendments, so your approval would be only for the amendments discussed, with this lease, with those amendments discussed. If it came back, then I'd want the council to review that to make sure that it is in fact in keeping with what the council approved. But should that come back the way that we discussed tonight, wouldn't be a need for additional action by the council, just to have that, just make sure, we just want to make sure that is in the landlord-tenant
Shut
agreement.
the hell up.
I need a background, I guess like my.
It's like unsolved mystery.
But yeah, if the council takes action tonight based upon the discussed amendments,
Then we'd be good.
then you're good to go, because you're giving consent for that specific, this contract with that additional term or terminology in it. So that would be covered. And I think, did this contract go into effect yesterday between the parties on August 1?
yes.
Okay.
Any other questions for Roger?
Just curious on the property map. Those lines accurate, or is it just a generalization?
Yeah, I remember they were crazy like that
They are
last time
fairly
we looked
accurate.
at this. Yeah, it's wild.
Well,
No, that's interesting.
I remember referencing the trapezoid a lot.
I'm just thinking, I don't know who owns that south of the south line.
It's an alleyway.
Yeah, that's the
That's an
alley.
easement?
Yeah,
Okay,
Yeah,
it's a legal alleyway.
that's my question.
The south parking lot, who owns that?
The rights. Amy
Alan
Allen
Wright still owns that? AJ Stevens didn't get that block for the railroad.
No. Any
So
other
you're
questions?
covered on that south end with the easement for Valley. I mean, you're not exposed to someone coming in and taking over that chunk of the
Correct.
parking lot.
They could not.
Is there any reason that we don't vacate that easement?
We got a lot of easements. to make there, I can tell you that.
That's for,
There's
that's for,
one I found that's going right through somebody's house and I
Got it.
called first lane.
we gotta spread the fun out. We can do that later today.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right, thank you, Roger.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Anybody else from the public like to speak to this agenda item? Council discussion? I do think that, I agree if CDC or utilities want to take on, I looked at the GIS map the other day just because I was a little bored. That's what I do when I'm downtown. And we have a ton of easements that are, just don't make any type of sense in alleyways. 'Cause these aren't easements, these are alleyways. Property lines are like that. So,
I remember looking at the old 12th Street between Ames and I. Some of them, like, they're not even big enough, even if the city ever did do something with it, they couldn't ever use it. They're so narrow.
usually property owners make applications, right, to do that, but I don't know. Like I said, I found one on South Sixth Street that literally goes through somebody's house. In the middle of it. It's an alleyway. So, anyways, council discussion on this?
No, I'm waiting on the ring.
Put on vibrate? Well, I'll have a free tutorial after the meeting.
Huh?
I'll have a free tutorial for you after the meeting adjourns, show you where the buttons are. Now, I'll entertain a motion.
Pulled up. Should we give it a shot?
Go for it. See how you do.
I move to approve the lease for the depot between Santa Fe Historical Society and Inland Railroad LLC as amended. Discussion tonight.
We'll move in second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. All right, next agenda item is branding, marketing. This is something I just wanted to bring to follow up, I guess, with the council, on what the city's been doing, and if the council wishes to continue, or what council wishes to do, so. With that, is there anybody from the public that'd like to speak to this agenda item? All right. Council discussion on our current branding marketing. Your thoughts, you guys good with?
I'm guessing this is the logo.
Yeah, marketing, our brands have been different on different medias, and does the council want to continue to do that? I'm just looking for some direction from the council.
So as I recall, the last time we talked about this logo with the buildings and all that, this was kind of understood that it was gonna be like a soft logo. This logo would be like on the water towers, on the police cars and stuff like that. This one would be like an alternate. Am I wrong? That's how I kind of remembered it.
That's what we talked, we never voted or anything.
Okay. Oh, okay.
We never approved anything officially, so that's why I'm just looking for direction on if the council wants to continue that, how we've been doing it, or
I guess we
I
just,
kind of remember discussing this before, and I was kind of confused on, I think it's confusing for people that there's the
Multiple.
city thing on the cars and the water tower, and then the street, I wasn't ever really clear on what we were supposed to do with that.
and I've noticed sometimes when we use, I like the logo with all the buildings, but I notice when it's used in certain applications, the Baldwin City part just gets so small that you just, I don't think people would look at that logo and think Baldwin City typically.
I think it'd be a good logo for Main Street.
Yeah, I agree. It'd be perfect for Main Street.
Main Street already has a logo.
Good.
Did they get the water tower repainted?
That was like probably too hot. Water tower.
Repainting?
It's a little crooked. Rob noticed it was a little crooked, so he's making them repaint it.
Crooked which way?
I think it tilted right a little bit.
Now, Rob, you only have one shoe on.
No, 'cause- no,
How do you go on?
when I look at it, it's not, it's pointed off too far east.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it
I
doesn't,
agree.
it doesn't, you
Yes.
don't see it coming down the road.
Right.
So when
I
they
thought
say
it was-
crooked, I'm like, hey, they agree. It was crooked.
You might bring that up in your committee to Rob just on that logo,
Yeah.
because I noticed that I'd rather face it
Yeah, both ways.
directly.
Straight out.
Yeah.
Right.
Perfect.
I was
Yeah,
wondering
Yeah, I
if
don't
there was
know.
a reason.
I think I tried looking and figuring out their logic behind that. And the stairs going up to the top are kind of, but if they push it at least closer to the stairs.
Right.
But if they're gonna repaint it, might as well have them move it to where you want it.
The thought of being up there painting that logo freaks me out, man.
I talked to Jackson the other day, and he said it was on their list.
To paint, yeah. You might, if the council wishes to have it rotate a little bit more, so facing more straight on to 1055.
Is it both directions?
Yeah, both directions.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, because they're kind of facing, one's kind of facing towards the southwest
Yeah.
and one's facing towards the northeast, so not real visible. I see it in my plan. So, what does the council wish to do? Whichever way we go on this.
So I guess the question is how do we want to use the newest logo that we talked about recently? Okay.
The main logo, I mean, that's on our water towers, it's on our
Mhm.
police cars. I
Mhm.
have zero intention of switching that out.
So should CDC just revisit the marketing plan?
And if that's what you guys, council wants to do.
We just need to know what questions being asked, and just want to clarify, so that's it. How do we want to use this one? Okay.
Take it up and see what's it.
We bring back a recommendation for how to use the new logo.
Does the council have any feedback for the committee before they go? I mean,
Sure. Don't screw it up.
Comes back to
A lot of pressure there.
That's gonna say.
Okay, we will do that. Put that on your agenda.
Okay, it's on.
All right, council committee reports, budget and finance, Scott.
Can I just ask really quick?
Yes.
So I understood that there would be a rezoning for the property across from Public Works.
That was removed from the agenda.
It was
That's-
removed.
That will be the next meeting.
Okay, so that'll be the first reading for the next meeting,
Correct,
and then it'll be voted on the first week of September.
correct.
Okay. Really good.
Yep.
Thank you all.
Yep.
I was wondering if I'd missed an abbreviation or something.
Nope.
Okay, thank you.
Budget and finance, Scott.
Yeah, we spent the last previous meeting working on the ordinances for the rates that we voted on tonight. That was the extent of the meeting. No meeting this Friday. Our next meeting will be August 19th, 7:45 a.m., second floor City Hall.
What did you say? Friday the 20,
The 19th.
tonight. Community development, Corey.
Yeah, we met on the 25th. Had quite a few items. The Midland lease was discussed. We just went through that. We discussed at length 4th of July fireworks ordinance. Kind of just went back and forth on different scenarios that might, we've had some people, obviously voice concern about the fireworks. We've had a lot of people voice support for the fireworks and people want them to go longer. There really are people who 10 days. 10 days is great. 10 days isn't always the norm. I think isn't that's kind of what the state is, and we kind of follow that. We can go anything obviously more stringent than that. And one of the scenarios I think that came out of that conversation that might be an alternative to, so first of all, in order to understand this, you have to see exactly what situations can come up based on the moving calendar. So every year it's going to be different. And the concern is that you're going to miss out on a weekend of fireworks based on where the 4th is going to land. You can shoot them off on the 5th, but according to statute, you can't shoot after the 5th at all. So 10 days from before the 5th covers both weekends before and after. So if the 4th lands on a weird thing where let's say, we we're not going to get this weekend all out, and then at least you get the previous weekend. So one of the scenarios that we thought about, if it was going to change, if the ordinance did change, might be a scenario, and please feedback is welcome. 8 days prior from the 5th will get you the previous Friday and Saturday. Previous Saturday and then the Friday, I believe, because it's 7 days, you can miss the Friday still, the previous Friday. So 8 days gets you the previous Friday, and that tightens it up 2 more days there. There's different scenarios for where the 4th lands. If it is on a Friday, whether it's or if it's on, I think this year it's on a Wednesday. So next year to 2023, it's on a Wednesday. So that makes it even more of a. So if we were to go 8 days prior to the 5th, that would land us on a Wednesday, whereas Wednesday would be the start date and the ending would be the 5th. But the 10 would mean you would just catch an extra Monday and Tuesday. And so, next year's kind of the one that really doesn't make sense if you really thought about it. You really want to shoot off Monday and Tuesday, and then, is it worth it? But then it's all those subsequent years where it makes sense. So it's just open discussion. We ran through, tons of different scenarios we literally got the calendar out and we're like, well, what if this happened? What if this happened? I considered and stutter through the whole thing, but, we're going to leave it and keep discussing it. I wanted to at least present that to you guys and discuss that as well. So, and we can just keep that up. We can maybe put it on the agenda for next time or what have you. However you want to do it. I know we're not supposed to have open discourse during this committee report, so I'll just keep moving, but that's what's going on in CDC. RFP for community centers still on track for August. Asked about that. Trail grants, unknown what the timeline is for hearing back on those. We had both those with 20 million different opportunities there for
One for the state, one for
just that one state, and that's kind of still in limbo. I think we were going to maybe reach out to some folks in the state and see what the holdup
I
is.
have not had.
Okay.
I meant to email the Lieutenant Governor and I have not had a chance.
Well, just kind of get some update on that. The Depot to Elm Street section of the trail should start this fall. All the easements are all tied up, so that's all I had. The next meeting is 4 o'clock, second floor of City Hall. For August is the 22nd.
Public safety, Susan.
We have not met since the last meeting. Our next meeting is a week from today, August 9th at 4 o'clock.
Public works and utilities, Julie.
We haven't met since the last meeting, and our next meeting is on the 11th at 9 o'clock.
Strategic planning, Scott.
We haven't met since the previous council meeting. Next meeting is this Friday, 3 p.m. at the Chamber of Commerce.
City administrator, staff comments.
What'd you say on the 19th? What did you get on the 19th?
That's the budget and finance committee.
Anything left?
Just a reminder, the Chamber of Commerce dinner and award ceremony is coming up. The council, the city always gets 2 tables, so you can come, bring a guest, whoever, got plenty of room usually. Everybody else, I don't know if Kate, you're getting a table this year or
Yeah.
flying a table, so we got plenty of room.
I'll be photographing you.
Be photographed, yeah, so, should be, right, they're doing it in August this year instead of February. They changed the month. We usually get bad weather in February, hoping for better weather here in August. But it's still gonna be blazing hot, who knows? But anyway, it won't snow. But anyway, it's a great time to celebrate all the good things the Chamber of Commerce and Main Street are doing and talk about our city and going forward, so.
Jerry, that's when you bring out your tongues.
Not what?
It's a formal event.
Bring your tux.
Bring your tux.
Yeah,
There
right.
you go.
Yeah, it's a formal event.
That
You
dress
gotta
and
wear your
tails.
tux and top hat.
I do not attend formal events and I don't wear a tux.
That is his top hat.
Right there. You can come as you are.
Council comments? I have nothing besides Rob texted me and said that logo was pushed over as far as they could because of the ladder and the cables.
There you go.
He must be watching, so you want to say hi to Rob.
What about the south
Hi,
side,
Rob.
championship?
Regis Phil,
I-
phone friend?
So Rob, if you're listening, Scott asked about the south side.
It don't have to be exactly
Okay.
All right. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Chief, did you have something you want to say to us?
A motion we adjourn.
I'll second.
It's been moved to second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Yeah.